right, our next speaker is Greg Tucker. So
Okay.
Greg, you are a professional of the IT industry of 30 years and of a blockchain startup for the last 3 years. You started mining Marscoin in 2019, awesome for you. And you're building solutions for cross-border payments and global access to permissionless financial systems. So take it away, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Okay, I think everything you just said sounds more or less about right. So yeah, I'm not going to do a big introduction to myself. I may follow up at the end with some, with some observations or comments about myself and some questions. Okay, so what we're trying to do here, I think at a high level, is to create a currency for a multiplanetary species, one that's scalable, and one that's decentralized and permissionless. And I'll actually touch base on what these mean here. Scalable really means we can make this a lot bigger than it currently is in terms of a variety of directions. One of them is going to be the number of transactions that we support. I actually don't know what the transaction limit is currently. I think it's probably somewhere, around Litecoin, levels of transaction scalability, but eventually we're going to need to scale beyond that. And also in the types of transactions. So right now we can send Marscoin from one person to another, but I think I saw Leonard's presentation, what was for me last night. And in that, I saw that there's a number of other proposed use cases or types of transactions that will be supported on the Marscoin. And I think these are really fantastic. A couple of those, I'm not quite sure how they're going to be implemented. My company is also implementing identity solutions, and the technology stack is somewhat different typically than Marscoin. So I'm really interested to see how those solutions are going to work out, and I'm really want to participate in the discussion of the implementation of those solutions. But in terms of types of transactions, there's other things we can do, like different kinds of coins and stuff that we can support, NFTs, things like that. And scalable in terms of latency tolerance. If this is something that's going to be presumably tradable on both Earth and Mars, then the coin has to be able to support the kind of latency that you have, with the speed of light or communication latency between Earth and Mars. Decentralized and permissionless it's a very difficult goal to achieve. Certainly, Bitcoin was a great innovation in major part because they solved some important decentralization and permissionless problems that allowed people to coordinate without necessarily having a central authority who sort of dictated who's allowed to to coordinate or who's allowed to participate and to arbitrate disputes and things like that. So there's no central authority, and so I think that Marscoin certainly continues that, but we need to continue that even further. And permissionless, again, in terms of not being able to deny access or deny permission to use Marscoin, and that's a very commonly a feature of fiat currencies, is that the government can sort of define who is allowed to and who's not allowed to interact with the currency. But Marscoin really needs to be, or is and needs to be, continue to be a permissionless coin. But this means individuals can participate. They can create wallets. They can operate full nodes, blockchain nodes. Developers can create new applications and support new use cases with Marscoin. Miners can operate full nodes, and they can generate new blocks via the process of mining. And exchanges can operate full nodes and can also participate with sending and receiving transactions. But Marscoin, is and needs to remain permissionless in the sense that there's no control over these people in the ecosystem and how they're allowed and what they're allowed to interact. Obviously, they just need to comply with the Marscoin protocol itself. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the history here. I know that there's been some discussion of this already. I saw Leonard's presentation where he talked, I think, pretty well about Bitcoin, but just putting some things into context, really. But the Bitcoin.org domain and the white paper came out in 2008. The first or Genesis block was mined in 2009. The Genesis block actually is now hard coded in code. But the rest of the chain, is basically sort of in a database. The first transaction with Hal Finney was completed in 2009. By the way, Hal Finney is one of the candidates for Satoshi Nakamoto. It's also possible that Satoshi Nakamoto was not one person; it was a group of people of potentially, and if that's the case, he was potentially one of also the members of the group of Satoshi Nakamoto. But lots of progress occurred in 2010. Basically, a market called the Bitcoin market opened up. We had the pizza transaction on 5/22, and that's now almost a famous holiday. Incidentally, by the way, on the last 5/22, which was just last month, I don't think you could actually buy pizza in Bitcoin anymore. So you could at one point apparently in time, but you cannot now. Yeah, lots happened and in 2010. So within roughly 1.5 years, Bitcoin reached a $1 million market cap. So fairly impressive growth overall. And of course, we know where it's at today, and it's really still a dominant force. And it's even, in fact, a legal currency in one country and soon to be more countries. Litecoin forked in 2011 by Charlie Lee. It just had some different conditions. It originally started off with an ASIC resistant mining algorithm. Of course, that is no longer ASIC resistant, but there are ASICs now for script. But the intention was something that's a little more democratic or widespread, something that didn't get centralized into mining farms. And it has a faster block count and also 4 times as many coins. Again, don't necessarily need to go into a deep history here with Marscoin. I'm sure there's been plenty of people here. Unfortunately, it was night for me. I did have to go to sleep. But I'm sure other people have covered, this topic fairly well. But the Genesis block, 2014, there are full nodes for, Windows, Mac, and Linux. And we did conduct a Mars bar transaction. It was 200 Mars on 2021-210. And that was me and also a gentleman in Australia. He goes by the term Phoenix X. I did get his shipping, so I do have his real name. I'm not going to tell you, but we conducted the first, to my knowledge, the first transaction of a product on Marscoin. So this talk is going to be about governance and really at a high level, what is governance? But all organizations have governance to some extent, whether they're doing it explicitly or sort of implicitly, whether or not those rules are done, or whether or not governance is done consistently. That can all vary, but really, it's just at the end of the day, governance is just the rules by which the rules are made. Okay, and in traditional corporations, you have a board of directors. The CEO of the company may also be the president of the board of directors, but he may not be as well. Or again, it may be a different person. Realistically, in a country like the United States, the Constitution really is the governance mechanism. And at least in the UK, for example, you have the monarchy as the governance. He or she, I guess, has really very little responsibility in terms of policy. Just simply make sure that the country is governed, that there is a viable and functioning government in place. And at the end of the day, that's her only role. Probably more than that, but but that's her main role in terms of running the country. But in terms of Marscoin, it's really the mechanisms by which the protocol of the network has changed. Okay? So who determines this? Who decides what the new protocols are going to be? When there's a change in protocol, who decides that? So just some observations that I have about Marscoin governance. The code base is really largely based on Litecoin circa 2013. There's probably been some refreshes since then. I actually tried to track back sort of where Marscoin refreshed against Litecoin. It was actually a very difficult thing, so I kind of gave up on it. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. It is based on a centralized reference implementation. I will swing back about what that means in comparison to other cryptocurrencies. But the standards are not necessarily defined independently. For example, like in the Internet Protocol or TCP/IP, you have an RFC standard which really defines what the protocol looks like, and then it's then you have in order to prove a new feature, for example, you have to have 2 independent implementations, you know, and test them over a live network. But we don't do that. It's really just based on, you know, whatever the reference implementation supports. That's what the protocol is. The centralized or Marscoin governance is centralized in the hands of a number of a small number of developers, primarily one developer. It really is a benign dictatorship, and this has served Marscoin, I think, relatively well. And I think in small settings, I think that a benign dictatorship can work. I think that it works well, for example, in Singapore. Singapore is a remarkably well-run country, an efficiently run country, and it has, for all intents and purposes, it has a democracy, but it does have, for all intents and purposes, a benign dictatorship. And again, it can work well, but I think as it scales, you know, you have to get beyond that. And I'll actually look at maybe a couple instances where that breaks down. There has been, I think, relatively little funding for development. I think we've relied a lot on Leonard's goodwill to continue to produce new features and continue to produce new versions. I think other people probably have contributed to that as well, but that may or may not continue forever. And again, if we are going to become a global or a multinational, multiplanetary coin, then I think it's really important to think beyond that in terms of capability. So what are some things that can happen? Well, you know, especially when you have a small number of developers, you know, or a benign dictatorship, you can, you know, get hit by a bus. Or, you know, there's lots of ways that the benign dictator can leave the organization. They can do it intentionally. They can do it unintentionally. There can be disputes within the community, and, you know, the person gets pissed off. There's just lots of things that can happen. There have been some cases throughout the crypto history. You can pretty much find, there's enough cryptocurrencies now that you can pretty much find any or some example to fit any particular you know, use case or concern. But there have been some that have made, you know, malevolent or, you know, self-serving decisions. But, you know, in general, then there can also be misaligned incentives. So I think that some of the future features that we'll need for Marscoin to become a multiplanetary coin and scale to that level sort of might go beyond what current stakeholders are interested in developing. So there are some misaligned incentives and a governance mechanism we really have to deal with how to fix that. So one example of this was a contentious change occurred within the Ethereum community in 2016. So DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, generally refers to a sort of a decentralized organization that's built on top of a smart contract on a blockchain. But in 2016, there was one in particular that started. It was just called the DAO, but that started, that was really launched to sort of crowdfund the development of the Ethereum blockchain. It did quickly raise a lot of money, a pretty significant chunk of the overall Ethereum coin base. This was Vitalik himself and quite a number of other major backers all put money into the smart contract. Soon after that, there was security researchers and others did note a number of failure cases or potentially exploitable cases within the DAO. But about 3 months after it was funded, a hacker did in fact exploit a defect in the smart contract, which then stole again quite a bit of the money that was in the DAO. The other people who were participants actually worked to also try to exploit the same hack to basically get their own money or the money of other people out of it to protect it from the hacker. But at the end of the day, the hacker did manage to steal, or at least on paper, managed to steal $60 million from the DAO. However, a number of developers, including Vitalik, did decide finally to implement a hard fork that basically rolled back the history before the attack occurred and then reallocated those coins to another smart contract. So this is, realistically a level of centralized control that we try to avoid in a decentralized cryptocurrency. And, this kind of sort of rolling back of changes that, or rolling back of transactions that somebody placed on the blockchain. The whole point of a blockchain is that it's immutable in the sense that previous transactions cannot be changed. But they basically built a new version of it, which did actually undo those transactions. So needless to say that that this kind of change was contentious. To some extent, again, this is normally the kind of thing that we don't want to happen, but it did have widespread support because really Ethereum was much less mature then than it is now, and it was a pretty significant amount of the coin base, and it was really a lot of the funding that was going to go for the development of Ethereum was in there. And at the end of the day, it did then have widespread support from miners and exchanges and node operators who all would have had to upgrade their software in order to support this really contentious change. But in the end, there was a sufficient number of people who did support the upgrade, and the change did go through. And this did actually give rise to another coin called ETC, but Ethereum Classic. So basically it gave rise to a split in the Ethereum community. Ethereum, or what we now know as ETH, did end up winning, but ETC is still out there. And ETC did not do this rollback because they felt it really betrayed the principles or purposes of what a cryptocurrency is really supposed to be. Some other bad examples. So Charlie Lee did found Litecoin back in 2017. I believe December 2017, he announced that he had sold all of his coins. He put this in sort of very positive purposes, that he had received a lot of criticism, that people were talking, or he was often talking up Litecoin and telling people to buy Litecoin or encouraging people to buy Litecoin, and people claimed that this was he was being self-serving. So by selling or donating all of his LTC, he claims he could be objective. He did of course sell at or near the top of the market. So again, it's maybe not quite as clear whether this is a situation of a rogue leader, but many people feel he betrayed the Litecoin community by really selling out the way that he did. Other bad examples, governance. The Nebulous organization runs or created a coin called Sia Coin. They were also attempting to market a mining hardware, a mining rig, and I believe this occurred in 2018, but a couple other companies who also build mining rigs actually came out with a compliant or supportive mining rig before Nebulus's hit the market. And so once theirs did hit the market, they made a change to the consensus mechanism that they knew wouldn't be supported by these competitive mining rigs, but would be supported by their own mining rigs. So a number of miners were out there. They were mining, SIA coins using these third-party mining rigs, but then basically they changed the protocol to support their own mining rigs, to support their own company's mining rig. Obviously, needless to say, this was a contentious change. It did, in fact, give rise to, once again, a split in the community where, SIA Classic came up in order to, basically, kind of not implement that particular change. Probably one of the most egregious examples of somebody who's just self-serving, self-dealing really is Justin Sun. Safe to say, if you see his name on it, it's probably something self-serving is going on. But he is the originator of the Tron coin. In 2020, okay, there's probably some history, so a lot of sordid details here. I can't go into it all. But he bought the Steemit blogging platform. Steemit had its own coin at that time called Steem. And one of the conditions or one of the characteristics of it was that there was, in fact, sort of a rogue pre-mine. So before the Steem was announced, the original Steem founders, mined about, at least at the time of the acquisition, about 20% of the coins. There was always an understanding that these coins would not be used for on-chain governance. And I think for the most part that they lived up to that. But when it was sold out, people didn't trust Justin Sun to honor that commitment. So they, some of the people who were, the major, holders of the Steem coin, actually then tried to create I believe, a soft fork, which would prevent those original kind of rogue mine coins from being used for on-chain governance. Of course, that pissed them off. It created a big break within the community. In the end, though, it ended up, ended up with a new blockchain called Hive, which was then used to replace what was originally Steem. Steem, I believe, since then has moved to the Tron coin. But again, just lots of things can happen when there's, not necessarily good control of who has control over the network. The reference implementation is one I said I would touch on. The Bitcoin is kind of well known. It has Bitcoin Core as sort of the official full node wallet. So Marscoin is not unique in this regard. Bitcoin Core, again, really the official one. Litecoin is Litecoin Core, again, official node. Ethereum itself does not define an official node or a reference implementation. For the product. They've always encouraged multiple wallet softwares, multiple nodes to be developed. The three largest at this time are Gas, Open Ethereum, and Ethermind. So the point, though, is that the reference implementation is not the only mechanism by which you can do this. Bitcoin Cash. You might be familiar with the split from Bitcoin, I think in 2017. Around 2020, so at the time in 2020, Bitcoin ABC was, for all intents and purposes, the reference implementation of Bitcoin Cash. I don't know if that was an official designation, but that was, for all intents and purposes, what it is. It was the most commonly used implementation. But in January, some miners gave rise to some talk about an infrastructure funding plan. So they, I think, recognized an issue that's similar to what perhaps Marscoin has, which is there wasn't a lot of funding for the building or the development of new infrastructure and new versions of the software and new functionality. So they gave rise to the IFP. There was a lot of contention about this, about the IFP. Originally, it was supposed to be a kind of quote unquote optional 12.5% donation of mining rewards to sort of a funding pool for a Hong Kong corporation, but a lot of the details in the initial plan were left vague. So after, it died for a few weeks, but then Bitcoin ABC announced that they were going to be building into their node basically a 5% IFP, and one of the funds was actually themselves, although there were a number of other funds that were going to be allowed that they did not necessarily control. But again, this is really a tax on Bitcoin Cash, and so it's the type of tax that many people oppose. And again, it created sort of a split within the community. So several things did happen. There was an idea of Flipstarter had been kicked around for quite some time in the past. In fact, there had been a couple attempts within the Bitcoin Cash community to run Flipstarter projects. They just didn't take off, at least in the incantation at that time. It did give rise then to basically another, hard fork split within BCH. So there's a new coin, BCHA, basically split off from BCH. But what did happen is that it gave rise effectively to Flipstarter. So the community was able to rally around basically an alternative funding approach for Bitcoin Cash. In this case, it was called Flipstarter.cash. They did use that to fund the development of other implementations. So Bitcoin Cash node effectively became the de facto implementation. But at the same time, within the community, they became wary of the whole concept of a reference implementation, because in this particular case, a reference implementation can, in one way or another, be hijacked by the community in a way that isn't necessarily what the entire community wants. So this was a quote from somebody I know within the community. Flipstarter was conceived and executed in a ridiculously short time frame as a necessity to counter the false claims of IFP in a concrete way. He didn't want to be quoted on that, in part because the Flipstarter concept had actually predated the IFP. So they've been kicking it around and attempting to do something like that. But it did actually successfully come about in a very short period of time in 2020 as a result of the IFP. So in general, what are some challenges? In decentralized governance, you have multiple actors. You have users who use the coin, who interact with it, who trade it, and whatnot. You have the companies who make wallet software. You have the organizations or people who develop the nodes. You have people who operate the nodes. You have the mining pool operators. You have miners. So you just have a variety of people in the ecosystem. There's also exchanges in there who don't necessarily have the same interests. Ethereum has made some changes, for example, to the mining pool algorithms that are not really compatible with what the miners wanted, but they did manage to push it through anyways. But yeah, there's just these competing interests, and so getting all of these people to agree to changes sometimes can be challenging. And just in general, funding for development is just a long-term challenge because again, there's different people who have different use cases, people with different interests from each other, some with different time horizons, and so getting the funding for these things can be a challenge. Within the Marscoin community, we do have a script mining pool challenge, I think. The problem is that we don't really own our mining pool. With mining Marscoin, we're really just an extremely, really it just rounds to 0%. An extremely small part of the overall hash rate capability of Script. We have a kind of a low steady state capacity. We do see large fluctuations in the capacity throughout the day. I think really what's happening is that a miner with a lot of capacity really come in and do a, wait for the difficulty to go down to a fairly low steady state level, and then they can mine a lot of coin in a short period of time, drive up the difficulty, and then they can just drop off. And the difficulty will remain a little bit high until sort of the low steady state is able to sort of catch up and reduce the difficulty again, at which point they just come back on the network and mine it back up. So we are seeing this kind of, already today, we're seeing this kind of fluctuating capacity or fluctuations in the mining rate taking place. Because of this, we're also very susceptible to a 51% attack. I don't know that we have been 51% attack, but we're certainly susceptible to it. At the very least, the miner, if they are so inclined, this large miner is so inclined, would be able to, just ignore blocks that are mined by other people and only really follow their own blocks, which would put all of the mining rewards into their hands. So there's lots of challenges that can come about with our relatively small hash rate base. There's also a latency problem between Earth and Mars, one that we're going to have to solve sooner or later. Earth to Moon is just a 1.3-second latency. That's still well within tolerance of our 2 minutes, 2-minute block time. But communication between Earth and Mars can vary between 3 minutes to 21 minutes. And when you go out, further into the solar system, these latencies just get larger and larger. So if this is going to be a multi-planetary currency, one that's capable of being traded in multiple, planets, then this latency problem is going to become a difficult one we have to solve. I'm not sure how we're going to solve it yet, possibly with parachains, but it's some development that is going to be required at some point. But if we don't solve it, then there's potential issues we can have, like a double spend. So a particular person, an adversary, whatever you want to call them, can schedule to create a transaction in 2 different locations at the same time. That's well within the latency of the, let's say, 3 to 21 minutes between Earth and Mars. We also potentially going to have a coin-based problem where the mining rewards are going to run out in 2024. We do have insufficient transaction fees at the moment, as of today, to really incentivize a lot of mining. So even the mining rewards that we do have doesn't incentivize a lot of mining within the whole stripped or S-stripped mining, mine base or hash base, but it's going to become even more difficult or more challenging once we sort of run out of these mining rewards in 2024. That's been reported, I think, by other people, and so it's a one problem that we're going to have to solve. I have some ideas, but I would have to propose those to the community and get consensus on those. So what do we need to achieve? Investment in new features, increased awareness and adoption. I think there's been other talks. Lewis's talk just before mine was excellent, where he talked a lot about awareness and adoption through the social networks, funding mechanisms to aid in achieving these goals. I'm going to propose a Flipstarter something like a Flipstarter.cash in the future, and just governance that ensures a fair evaluation of new features and implementation of these new features. Okay, my own wish list. I probably don't need to, I'm not sure how I am on time now. I probably don't need to go through these in much detail. In fact, I might be over on time already. But I think some of these have been already discussed, but a couple of things I would like to see in the future would be a Flipstarter-like funding platform, something that's on-chain, something that involves coins on-chain, something that involves potentially the core development, something that involves the development of new use cases and potentially third-party integrations. The good thing about a Flipstarter-like funding platform compared to the Mars Coin Development Fund is that the people who are funding it can decide exactly what they're funding, and they know why they're funding it. So there's a little bit more democratic control over the funding. We're probably going to need to impose, or at least at some point, develop some kind of like a Marscoin improvement protocol. Of course, in Bitcoin, it's called BIP, the Bitcoin Improvement Protocol. Bitcoin Cash, they call it CHIP. But we'll probably eventually need to develop a protocol like that to handle this, or to govern Marscoin. So what can we do for now? Well, please don't blame the Marscoin developer every time the price goes down. I don't know, you don't have to go far back in our history to see this particular thread. But and it might have been made tongue in cheek, I don't know, but it was not one of the more impressive displays of citizenship that I've seen regarding Marscoin. But the Marscoin developers don't control the prices. Okay, there's actors out there. Some of them may be malicious. Some of them have incentives that are not aligned with my incentives, and you know, they buy and sell coins on different time schedules than I do. So, or you know, than maybe most of the community. But yeah, we don't control prices. There is a development fund, but there isn't, you know, really a paid marketing team, and there isn't really funding, you know, from one person to you know, to advertise in the Super Bowl or whatnot. So yeah, you know, maybe let's not blame the developers. Let's not blame other people when, you know, when prices change in ways that we don't necessarily like. So other ways we can contribute, just, you know, let's not point fingers. You know, this is it's a decentralized community, it's permissionless community, so we're all responsible for the development of it. So let's not point fingers at Leonard or anyone else. And let's, you know, all work for ourselves to determine, you know, how can I contribute to the community? How can I contribute to new Marscoin clients or new integrations or new use cases for Marscoin? How can, and even if I'm not a developer, or if you're not a developer, you can also contribute through just the contribution of funds to people who are doing the development of clients or integrations and use cases. And you can contribute to the Marscoin Development Fund. In the future, I will also be developing a Flipstarter-like development fund also. Again, something that gives people the ability to sort of decide how their funds are going to use. I fully support the Marscoin Development Fund, but I don't necessarily see a lot of transparency in it. I don't know how those funds are being used, why they're being used, how much they've raised, how much they have, things like that. I just don't know anything about the Marscoin Development Fund. And I would like to see other funding mechanisms besides that put in place. Participate in the Marscoin dev group on Gitter. It's been a little bit quiet lately for all the development that I know that is taking place, or that Leonard has promised is taking place in his speech. I haven't seen a lot, but so I'd like to see and myself participate more in the Marscoin dev group on Gitter. There's also the GitHub. There's issues and roadmaps on the GitHub itself, which I know James and Leonard have spent a lot of time on. You can also always, you know, purchase an ASIC mining rig and mine Marscoin yourself. I'm not a big fan necessarily of using sort of a non-ASIC rig. I think I've stated that in the community in Discord before, in part because the you know, just using your GPU, you don't get a lot of hash rate out of it. So you're just not going to be doing a lot of mining. It's just more activity without necessarily a lot of benefit. But yeah, get yourself a script ASIC rig and mine Marscoin and mine it on a steady basis, because our you know, steady state rate is fairly low, and we need to increase that to prevent the kind of you know, day-to-day or you know, hour-to-hour fluctuations that we do currently see. You know, buy Marscoin, so we need to keep you know having a consistent market or a consistent people who are consistently buying, Marscoin on the exchanges. So we need more of that, definitely, to keep the price both stable and also to keep it going up. Give Marscoin to friends and to Mars advocates. So if you attend a Mars Society convention, give some Marscoin to people. There's certainly, one way to sort of increase exposure. It doesn't have to be a lot. It might just be 10 Marscoin. And when some of these new wallets, especially the mobile wallets, become more common or more available, then it's going to be much easier to sort of give away coins to people at conventions, and especially when we're post-COVID and we can actually have in-person conventions. And finally, we'll contribute to Marscoin to the Mars Initiative. That was a self-serving plug. So I am one of the original founders. I'm not actually a founder, but I'm one of the original contributors to and participants in the Mars Initiative. So who am I in general? And we'll get into some questions if there are any, but Greg Tucker, so I'm a veteran of the IT industry. I spent a number of years managing infrastructure for organizations, not traditionally a software developer, but more on the administration side. I did spend a number of years working with BMC and BMC products, doing process consulting. If you're familiar with ITIL, so I spent a long time in the ITIL communities and working with BMC software packages to basically automate the development of ITIL processes and procedures. So I spent a number of years, but for the last 3 years, I've been working with TBCA Soft. We are a blockchain, or actually a company who's developing a suite of blockchain solutions for the telecoms industry. Our most mature product right now is we're focused on a payment solution for mobile wallet software, or for mobile wallet payment systems. So we're basically linking mobile wallet payment systems in different countries. We are not a cryptocurrency. Somebody did actually spoof us and create a spoof cryptocurrency in our name, but that was not us. We are not releasing a cryptocurrency, but we are building blockchain solutions. So I was Mars Mile 2 contributor to the Mars Initiative. Around that same time, actually a little bit prior to that, I was one of the sort of the founding founders of the Dallas chapter of the Mars Society. And I moved away, so I'm no longer involved in them regularly, but Kurt, who was also one of the founders, is still running that organization. I've also been a Marscoin miner since 2019, and you can reach me in a variety of places. I should also just point out that if you use Session as a new chat application, it's a little bit immature still, but it's a good chat application for privacy. So if you're concerned about privacy and decentralization, feel free to connect with me on Session using the QR code on the screen. I think at a high level, that's kind of my observations of where we're at, and I hope it was interesting, and I hope I didn't offend anybody in the process.
No, thank you so much, Greg. Those were great comments. I definitely agree with you on a lot of the points you made. Regarding the development fund, I think we all consider that kind of a placeholder until we have a real DAO or Flipstarter style development fund that lets the community vote on what we work on. But I think in the meantime, we're highly susceptible to feedback. Everyone can give us feedback on what to do. I will tell you, we have not tapped any of the development fund yet. We will once we need to list on another exchange or are going to fund directly something development-wise. We have not tapped it yet, and we will commit to putting reports out of what's in the development fund now. A couple questions you have. So question from Leonard. What do you think about Decred or Dash with their public proposal systems of governance?
I don't know enough about it. I have held, you're talking about the Dash coin. I have held the Dash coin in the past. I guess, sorry, I'm just not familiar enough with their particular mechanisms.
No worries. Another question from Jeremy Fabiano. Have you pondered or considered the security, malleability, fluidity, and scalability that comes with a multi-chain single coin model for Marscoin. Technology changes and state-level security breaches are inevitable with mass adoption. How should Marscoin deal with that?
So we're talking about parachains here. You know, parachains is definitely a challenge. I think, you know, of course, Ethereum is now tackling the parallel chain problem right now. You know, whether and how well they tackle that is something that's not really, you know, understood yet. I'm skeptical because, you know, right now you can sort of interact with Ethereum and it interacts with all, you know, with all smart contracts on Ethereum. But in the future, you know, you're going to have different smart contracts running on different parallel chains, and that's, you know, which is going to lose that sort of that global state, I guess, because you know, you know, if you have coins that are on a particular chain, for example, you know, you have to move them to another chain. I'm not sure exactly how well that's going to work, but certainly, you know, Ethereum is dealing with that. There's another chain which has become fairly popular lately, and I am just drawing a blank right now on their name. But it's
Cardano?
No, not Cardano. Yeah, again, I'm just yeah, I'll go look on the coin. It's one of the top 10 coins, but they're focused very heavily on building parallel chains also. So I think there are definitely, you know, governance models now that are being put in place within other, you know, other organizations, and I think we just need to kind of look at how are they tackling the parallel chain issue, and you know, and decide is that the right solution that we need to implement in Marscoin, and then how do we implement it. So I don't think one person, Leonard alone, is going to be able to tackle that challenge. So it's going to really require a community to tackle these kind of challenges, to research the, you know, the different challenges that the other communities have had and how they've solved it, and sort of bring some of that, those lessons and lessons, the good lessons and bad lessons to Marscoin.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Okay, well, thank you so much, Greg. That was great. Really appreciate you participating in our event today. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.